Bath Ales Gem Amber Ale.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. This is pretty cold and I think it should be a little bit warmer. This is the Gem Amber Ale and it's come from Bath Ales, based down there in the southwest of England, where I have just come from. We went to Bristol for the weekend. My missus had a conference down there. She's doing this travel agency, something to do with travel agents, as a sideline to her normal hairdressing, and there was a conference down there and she asked me to drive her down there. We could make a weekend of it. And I obliged. Now, I had visions of Bristol being a little bit different, a little bit edgy, and not a lot to do. But I was pleasantly surprised. And what really did surprise me was the selection of good ale that they had down there. And another thing that surprised me was the amount of people that were drinking craft beer. I did walk past a Brewdog place. They had a Brewdog pub on a corner near, what was the place called? Was it Radcliffe or something? I can't remember what it was called. Might not have been Radcliffe. It was something like that. Just over the bridge. You go over, I think it's Bristol Bridge. You go over that and it's there on the corner right near the quay. And yeah, I didn't fucking go in there, but it was packed. There was a lot of people drinking there, and I saw people out buying craft beer and all that, and mostly young people, not old fuckers like me. And I thought, well, there really is a market for craft beer down here. So the urge to go into Brewdog and call them all a bunch of effing C's. No, I wouldn't have done that. Or would I? Who knows? No, I wouldn't have. But I resisted the urge and I settled for the Fuller's pub across the road. Did a little video of that. I'm sure you've seen that. That was fantastic. If anybody thinks the recipe for London Pride has changed, you really need to try it on cask or keg from a pub that stores it really well, and most Fuller's pubs do. Fuller's are quite diligent on that front, where they go around and they check the beer that they're selling, and they make sure that they train their bar staff up on how to pour and store their beer. The ESB they had on tap was excellent. The London Pride they had on tap was excellent. And I noticed they did some Adnams beers in there as well. I didn't try any. I was too busy indulging myself with the ESB and the London Pride, but it was a nice surprise to see that down there so far from home. And yeah, I did indulge and have a few. It was very nice indeed. Certainly better than the shite they were selling across the road in Brewdog's pub. Anyway, that's that. But another beer that is available in Bristol and has origins in Bristol as well, I'll get onto that in a sec, is this stuff. Now, I've seen this stuff in Morrison's quite often when I've gone down there. And it's been one of them beers, and I don't know why, but it's just never appealed to me. What does it for me is this new term that they've got on there. Can you see that? Amber Ale. Now, when you see amber ale on most beers, if the style is correct, a lot of brewers now have got an aversion to putting bitter or best bitter on their beers, and they call it amber ale. Now, I don't know why they do that. I don't know. I think again, this is where the marketing comes into it. I think bitter is not all brewers, and I will say this: it's not all brewers. It's just some brewers. They want to call what effectively is a best bitter or a bitter. They want to call it an amber ale. I don't know whether they think it makes it more appealing to people to buy, whether the phrase or the style bitter It is just a throwback, and it would put people off it. Whether the actual adjective would put people off the beer, I don't know. But this is, from what I can gather, a bitter, and a best bitter at that. And this is their flagship ale. It was also the first beer that they brewed. Now, the origins, they date back to 1995, so they're relatively new. They originally, or the two founders originally worked for, is it Smiles Brewery? Was it Smiley's Brewery? I think it's Smiles Brewery, who are based in Bristol. And two of them branched off and they started brewing this stuff. The first landlord to take on their beer and start selling it was very enthusiastic about it, so they took him on as well. And it's gone from strength to strength, and they own quite a few pubs based in Bath. I think there's a couple in Bristol as well, and the surrounding areas. And recently, I think it was, well, they did expand, and up to, I think it was 2006, 2007, they expanded even further. They became very popular and they were selling a lot of beer. This piqued the interest of the St Austell Brewery in Cornwall. Now, they have a habit of buying up these smaller breweries, but they're still an independent brewer, and I'm hoping, because to be honest, the St Austell Brewery beer isn't that great. The Tribute is okay on cask, I will say that, but from the bottle I found it very uninspiring. Proper Job I found very uninspiring. The Korev lager I thought was, it reminds me of the Spitfire lager and the Whitstable Bay lager. It's okay in a pinch, but you wouldn't really put it up there with some of the best lagers, if you know what I mean. And to be honest, it's a cut above the macro brewed stuff, yet I will say that, but it really doesn't hold up against any of the foreign lagers from Germany and even from Belgium as well. Some of them pilsners, even the macro brewed pilsners like Stella from Belgium, there is a distinction, and it is quite nice in Belgium. It tastes nothing like the shit that's brewed over here. That's a fact. I've tasted both. Jupiler as well. Everything about that should say no, but that tastes quite nice, and I've drank my fair share of both and enjoyed them very much. Anyway, back on topic. This stuff, they've been taken over by the St Austell Brewery, but as far as I can tell, St Austell have sort of let them get on with it. And the ingredients look quite good, which is making me wonder why I didn't investigate this sooner. Because I've seen this, every time I've seen this in Morrison's, I don't know what it is, and maybe it's because it's very simplistic artwork, and I should like that. I don't know if you can see that up, but it's just got a dashing hair as the logo on there, and that is their logo for Bath Ales. But I don't know what it was. Maybe it's me being fickle. It's very minimalistic, and I do like that in some beers, but I don't know what it was for that one. It just didn't appeal to me, but I saw it the other day when I was in Morrison's, and I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to have some of that. Amber Ale, and again, I'm starting to come around to that idea now where it says Amber Ale, it's more than likely a bitter or a best beer, so it's worth bearing that in mind. There you go. Anyway, let's investigate this beer. Right, it's 500ml bottle. It is 4.8%. I think this is 4.1% on cask. It is, as I said, it's a bitter or a best bitter. No brew sheet on the bottle, but if you look on the website, it's got an interesting brew sheet. Firstly, the hops are Kent Goldings. And of course, I live in Kent now. I can't claim to be a Londoner anymore. Well, I can. I'm born and bred in London, but I live in Kent now. So I'm living in hop country. There's three sort of regions in the UK where hops are renowned. Kent probably being the biggest, Warwickshire, and I think Hereford as well. I think they're the three big areas for hop growing, but Kent has always had a tradition of growing hops. If you look up the history of Londoners post-war, their holidays, and this is, you know, in austere times as we are, it's quite humbling to read the history of what families did in the sort of 40s and 50s, and even up to the 70s. They would come out to Kent, they would have 2 weeks, and this would be when the factories would close down in London. They would have 2 weeks. A lot of families would come out to Kent, certainly from South London, but also from North London as well. And they organised special trains that would come out to rural Kent, and the families would camp out here. It'd be great adventures for the kids, but the dads would be out all day doing farm work, bringing the hops in. So it wasn't really a holiday for him. And the women as well, they did work with the hops. And I don't know whether you know, but if you work with hops, they're very, well, they're not skin friendly, and they rip the skin off your hands to shreds. And, you know, the mothers, as well as looking after the kids, they'd be stripping the hops off the vines, and they'd be doing stuff around the farm as well as looking after the kids, feeding the kids. It wasn't just hop picking, they did fruit picking as well. But it wasn't really a holiday. And it does make you think, you know, most of them fellas would have served during World War II, and they must have been fucking exhausted, and they really were made of tough stuff back then. And my family didn't do it. My family, being Irish, of course, they were over in Ireland during the war, and Ireland was neutral, and my dad never served in the army or anything like that, but I had uncles and cousins who did. I had an uncle who was killed in the Royal Navy hunting U-boats, believe it or not, and I had a great uncle who was in the Merchant Navy, and they served in World War II. Unusual to see Irish people, but there was quite a sizable amount, certainly in the First World War, but in the Second World War as well. There's a sizable amount of Irish that fought in all services during the Second World War. But personally, my family didn't. They were based in Ireland. They didn't come over to England until the 1950s. You know, the old saying when they said no blacks and no Irish. My mum remembers that. My mum told me an interesting story. I don't want to get political on this, and I don't want to upset people, but my mum said a lot of them notices on the windows that said no Irish, a lot of the time it was Irish landladies who'd moved over here earlier. They had big houses, their families had moved out, and they had these large houses, and they were renting the rooms out. The reason they didn't want to let it out to the Irish, because most of the Irish people that would have been renting were blokes that had come over from Ireland, and they were working on the roads, they was working on the building site and various other manual labour jobs. And it's not a stereotype, and this is the truth, according to my mum. She said a lot of them Irish blokes they didn't want to be around in the evenings because there was nothing to do, so they'd go to the pub and they'd drink their wages. They'd come back in all kinds of states. A lot of houses, they caught fire because they'd fall asleep, cigarettes would fall onto the carpet and there'd be fires. A lot of Irish blokes, I mean, you know what it's like when you're pissed, you come in, you're falling all over the place, you're breaking stuff. And that's why a lot of them Irish landladies knew what Irish blokes were like when they got drunk, and that's why they didn't want them in there. My mum never said she really saw prejudice towards Irish women. My mum found accommodation quite easily, and it was only because she was with my dad that my dad got accommodation. I imagine if my old man had been on his own, he would have found it very difficult. And it wasn't just Irish landladies. I imagine word got round, and English landlords and landladies got all that as well. Why they didn't like the blacks, I don't know. I think that was probably just because they were different, and you know, back then it was different times. We can't really, I mean, we do compare them there. We shouldn't really be doing that. They were different times. Why didn't they like dogs? Well, dogs bark and they will piss and shit everywhere, as I know. So there you go. I don't want to get too political on that, but I'm just telling you a little bit of family history. Take that whatever way you want. There's no agenda there. That's what my mother told me. Whether it's true, whether it's false, you'll have to ask her. But you'll have to do it through a medium because she's dead. So there you go. Anyway, that's the hops. The malt, Maris Otter, one of my favourites. Now, there will be a base malt in this. It'll be a pale malt of some description. They don't mention that, but they do mention Maris Otter. Now, Maris Otter is a very nice hop indeed, and it's rare that I get a bad beer that's got Maris Otter in. Maris Otter is a very expensive, well, I say very expensive, but it's a relatively expensive, and brewers that put it in there generally tend to not waste it. They want their beer to taste good because it's got this expensive type of malt in there, and it really is nice because it's got a nice sweet taste to it, and the reason for that is obviously the abundance of the sugars in the malt as they've started germinating. Maris Otter does produce quite strong and pungent sugars and sweet starches that are in there, which the yeast will feed on, and that will come out in the eventual flavour. And it does go really well with bitters and these dark English beers, because it is a great malt, and it's grown over here in the UK, probably up in Suffolk. That's where you get your best malts from, as has been borne out by some of the great beers that Adnams have brewed, and the St Peter's Brewery, of course. So there you go, and all that remains now is to get it open, and let's see what it looks like. Right, this will be my first one, I think, from Bath Ales. I don't think I've had one before. I've got this from Morrison's. This is also available in Asda's, and if you're lucky enough to live in the southwest of the United Kingdom, you may find this in local supermarkets such as the Co-op and other smaller scale supermarkets. I don't know how much this cost me. I think it was about £2.50 or something like that, probably a little bit less actually. I should have noted down the price, but there you go. I haven't got it. It is an amber ale. You can see that it does look amber. It's quite nice actually. And it's a dark amber. It's more of a chestnut colour, or bordering on chestnut. Anyway, nice tightly packed head on that. Very uniform bubbles. I'm going to give that a little bit more of a head on that because I think it deserves it. Yeah. Aroma. Lovely. Very nice indeed. Nice sweet malt. Earthiness to it as well. Probably coming from them Goldings. That's what them Goldings are renowned for. Nice earthy flavours. Sometimes you get a little bit of herbal bitterness on top of that as well. But this smells really good. Intrigued now. And that Maris Otter, you can smell that. There is a sweetness to it. But it does smell like a bitter. It looks like a bitter. It smells like a bitter. Does it taste like a bitter? Let's find out. Bottoms up. Oh. Oh. That is lovely. Oh, that is a really good bitter. Oh, I'm loving that. That is superb. I can see why this was popular. This is really nice. I can only imagine what this is like on cask. Oh, that is really good. If you like bitter, you're going to absolutely love this. This is real good example. It's got the characteristics of a really good bitter. Oh, and I'm loving it. And I think calling it an amber ale, you're doing it a disservice. You should be calling this a best bitter, because it really is. There's lovely caramel malt, sweetish caramel malt on the palate. But there's a big backbone of earthiness running all the way through it, and that's dominant throughout. And it mingles well with the malt that's in here. And then the finish, slightly bitter. I'd say bittersweet, because you still get them Maris Otter notes coming through it, the sweet Maris Otter. But there's a nice peppery type bitterness, again coming from them East Kent, well, if they're East Kent Goldings or just Kent Goldings, they really do stand out in this. They really have done that, and I'm sure they're using loose-leafed hops in this, because you really do get the hop character on this. I love it. I really do love it. However, I will say bitter is an acquired taste. Now, I absolutely love it. Ever since I've got into reviewing beer and reviewing real ales especially, bitter is a staple. I really do like it. And there is a difference between English ale and bitters. Bitters do have the characteristic of using only English hops. You'd know, if you put in American hops into bitter, you've lost the plot completely. American hops were, and hopefully will never be, part of a best bitter or a bitter recipe, I should say. It's a taste of England. That's what I consider best bitter to be. However, it may not be for everyone because of that bitterness on the finish. Some people just don't like that. They like something a little bit smoother. But if you like bitter, you're going to absolutely love this. Because it's got lovely big malty notes on this. Sweet malty, caramel type notes on there, which are big. But then you've got that earthiness from the hops running all the way through it. And a nice bitter sweet finish. A combination of the two with a little bit of black pepper spice just to make it that little bit more bitter. I love it. I absolutely love this. This is fantastic. And it's a really nice surprise for me because when you go down to the Morrison's aisle like I do, my go-to if I want a bitter is Timothy Taylor Bulkmaker, which is a great bitter, I think. They don't do ESB unfortunately, but that is another one of my favourites. I think this is probably going to be one of my favourites, and I may have to pick up some more bottles of this because this is really nice and it's packed full of flavour. That's what I really like about this. It's like this has been brewed by a brewery that's a lot older than its founding date of 1995. I'm trying to do the maths in my head, but I'm fucking shit at maths. What would that be? 15, 20? It'd be, I don't know, 20, nearly 30 years, 28 years. Yeah, it's 28 years, something like that. But they've really captured the style well. They've done their homework. They've got the correct ingredients, and they've come up with this, and it's a masterpiece. And again, how would I put it? My fickleness, if you want, my snobbishness has just always given this a swerve for some reason, and I don't know why. There's no reason to. I mean, look at it. It says full-bodied and malty. Definitely full-bodied. I will give you that on that one. It is definitely full-bodied and malty too. The malt character on this is huge. 4.8%. That's a nice ABV. A little bit above session ABV, but it's still good. Oh, I'm really liking this. Oh, it's good. That's really nice. And I think I can feel a head-to-head coming on here with Timothy Taylor Bulkmaker, because that is a fantastic bitter. And you shouldn't be confusing bitter and English ale. And it annoys me that some people think that Hobgoblin is the be-all and end-all of bitter. It's not even a bitter, I would say. It's more of like a ruby ale. And it's, well, it used to be good till Masters took over and they just put the kibosh on it. But this is great. And even St Austell could learn a lot. I can see why they like this. And if I was brewer at St Austell, I'd be going down to the brewmaster at Bath Ales and saying, we need a bitter, something like this, because this is fantastic and it's put a smile on my face. Loving it. So what is the verdict on Gem Amber Ale? Well, I had a bit of a reservation going on with the Amber Ale label. That seems to be the new default for bitter now. Bitter seems to be a dirty word, I don't know why. But this has got all the traits of a best bitter. I can see why it's their flagship ale, because if it tastes like that from a bottle, then it's going to be even nicer on cask. Is it as good as the Timothy Taylor Bulkmaker, which is one of my favourite bitters? Oh, I do not know. I'm going to have to do a head-to-head on that one. But I think this is more full-bodied than the Timothy Taylor Bulkmaker. I haven't got it in the fridge, have I? No, I haven't. Bollocks. I normally... Oh no, I drank it the other night. Fucking hell. That's really good. That is really good. It may not be for everyone, because if you're a fan of your English beers, especially your bitters, yeah, you're going to like it. If you're a fan of your German Helleses, even your Dunkels as well, it's not that sweet. It doesn't have that same characteristic. That is, for me, a slice or a glass full of England, that is, and it just tastes great. If you're a German and you're a fan of alt beer, you'll like it. However, I don't know how easy this is to get outside of the UK. How easy it is to get even in the north of England. I imagine this is a regional beer, and these are, I wouldn't say a small brewer, but they're a smallish brewer. But these are the hidden gems, believe me. Brewers that are on this sort of scale, Cotley is another one from the similar sort of region. They're from Somerset too. This is where you find the hidden gems, and I'm sure there's a load of these up in Yorkshire and in Lancashire as well, and even in the Midlands too. These are the ones just bubbling below the surface. They're not quite microbreweries, they're not craft brewers, but then they haven't gone to that next level that like Shepherd Neame, Timothy Taylor. They're not quite on that scale yet. They're just in between. There's where you find the hidden gems. No pun intended. But yeah, this is fantastic. For me, this is a 10 out of 10 bitter. I think it's great. And I'll give it a 10 out of 10 with a caveat, because I do realise bitter isn't for everyone. It's not, how can I put it? It's not young and dynamic. It's old and traditional, but it doesn't mean it's inaccessible. If you drink that, then you will get the flavour. Believe me, you will. And I know they've been taken over by St Austell, who are one of the bigger breweries. They're at the level of, I would say, Shepherd Neame, Fuller's, that type of thing. And well, I don't know whether Fuller's have been taken over by Asahi, so they're probably in another level. But again, it's another example of a good brewery who stuck to their roots and just kept doing what they do. Now they do other beers as well, traditional beers, and I think I'm going to have to investigate these further, because that is fantastic. For me, that's a great bitter. Keep your eyes peeled for a head-to-head with the Timothy Taylor Bulk Maker. On my next shopping trip, I'll be getting two of them, and I'll be doing a head-to-head, because I want to see, that'll be North v South, and yeah, be interesting to see. But either way, I'll be onto a winner, because they're both great bitters. And I will say, on the head-to-head videos that I do, you know, the ones I've just recently done, the triple, I've done the lagers, I normally compare the best with the best. Again, just my opinion, and opinions are like arseholes, everyone's got one, I know that, but in my opinion, some of the best beers, I like to compare them. I did it with the Adnams Broadside and the Old Peculiar. Adnams won the day, but it was very, very close. And that's why it does stretch my palate, because I have to make a very, very difficult decision, because I'm comparing the best with the best. I'm not going to compare Marston's with something like this, because there's no point. It's not even worthy of comparison. But when you get two fantastic beers, I like to find the one which I prefer. And don't get me wrong, if I do prefer one, it doesn't mean the other one's bad. It means if you make it to one of my, I'm not saying, oh fucking hell, like I'm some kind of authority or whatnot, but if you make it onto one of them comparison videos, you're definitely doing something right. And if you buy either of them beers, you are not going to miss out. But there you go. For me, that's a 10 out of 10. Watch out for the comparison with the Bulk Maker. And remember, beer is working class champagne.